A German Shepherd refuses to be adopted by anyone. No one can get near him without being snarled at. But when a quiet shelter worker steps forward, something strange happens. The dog doesn't attack. He stands guard. That night, the shelter alarm blares, and the dog moves like he's done this before, like a soldier waiting for orders. When the vet scans his microchip, the truth freezes everyone in the room. This isn't just a rescue dog. He belonged to someone powerful, someone missing, someone dangerous. Now the woman who saved him realizes she might be the next target. Because this dog isn't protecting a home, he's protecting a secret someone will kill to keep buried. What did this dog see? And why does everyone who tries to claim him end up disappearing? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Lynette Crow's second week at the North Fork County shelter started much like her first, with paperwork, the smell of kibble, and the watchful eyes of Y9. The large German Shepherd had caught her attention from day one, not because of his imposing size, but because of something else she couldn't quite put her finger on. She sat at the front desk, organizing intake forms, while keeping one eye on the kennels visible through the glass partition. Y9 stood at attention in his run, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Unlike the other dogs who dozed or paced, he remained vigilant, those amber eyes tracking every movement in the hallway. A young couple approached the viewing area, and Lynette observed Y9's reaction. His lip curled, revealing white teeth, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. The couple quickly moved on to look at a friendly golden retriever mix instead. "That's the fourth family he's scared off today," remarked Sandra, one of the long-time volunteers, as she dropped off more paperwork at Lynette's desk. "Such a shame. He's a beautiful dog, but that aggression—" Lynette frowned, studying Y9 more closely. "I'm not sure it's aggression," she said slowly. The way he held himself, the calculated way his eyes swept the room, it reminded her of something she'd seen before, though she couldn't quite place it. Throughout the morning, more potential adopters came and went. Each time, Y9's response was the same, that warning growl, that predatory focus. But Lynette noticed something else too. He never lunged at the fence, never barked frantically like truly aggressive dogs often did. Instead, his reactions seemed measured, controlled. During her lunch break, Lynette sat in the small break room, picking at her sandwich while reviewing Y9's sparse intake paperwork. Found wandering near the industrial district, no collar, no microchip, estimated age 4 to 6 years, no other information available. The sudden crash of a metal feeding tray hitting the floor in the break room made her jump. Before she could even process what had happened, she heard the scrape of nails on concrete and looked up to see Y9 positioning himself between her and the doorway. His stance was wide, head low, ears forward, not the posture of a frightened dog, but of one ready for action. "How did you—" Lynette began, then realized someone must have left his kennel door unlatched during cleaning. But what struck her wasn't his escape. It was his response. He hadn't run for freedom or attacked in fear. He had moved to protect. "It's okay, boy," she said softly, remaining still. "It was just a tray." Y9's eyes flicked to her face, then back to the doorway. He held his position until Sandra appeared with a leash. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," Sandra exclaimed. "I must not have secured his latch properly. Are you all right?" Lynette nodded, her mind racing. "I'm fine. He didn't try to hurt me. Actually, he—" She paused, considering how to explain what she'd just witnessed. "He was protecting me." Sandra looked skeptical as she carefully approached Y9, who allowed himself to be leashed without resistance. "Are you sure? He's been so aggressive with everyone." "Not aggressive," Lynette corrected. the pieces finally clicking into place. Defensive. There's a difference. After her shift ended, Lynette found herself staying late, watching Y9 through the kennel window as the shelter settled into its nighttime quiet. The overhead lights dimmed, leaving only the security lamps casting long shadows across the floor. Most of the dogs had curled up to sleep, but Y9 remained alert, those intelligent eyes reflecting the dim light. Around 11 o'clock, a sharp metallic sound came from the rear of the building. While other dogs startled awake and began barking, Y9's reaction was strikingly different. He went completely still, ears pricked forward, body tense but silent. It was the reaction of a trained guardian, not a frightened stray. Lynette's heart began to race as she heard footsteps outside the building's back door. She ducked behind the front desk, pulling out her phone to dial 911. Through the darkness, she could see Y9 tracking something, or someone, that she couldn't see, his body language screaming of tactical awareness rather than fear. The back door rattled, and then there was the distinct sound of someone trying to force it open. The other dogs were now barking in earnest, creating a cacophony of noise, but Y9 remained eerily silent, his focus absolute. The rattling continued for several more tense minutes, before suddenly stopping. Lynette heard rapid footsteps retreating, probably scared off by the barking and the possibility of security systems. As her racing heart began to slow, Lynette stared at Y9 with new understanding. This was no ordinary shelter dog. The calculated responses, the protective instincts, the tactical awareness, it all pointed to extensive training. Military or law enforcement, perhaps. But how had such a valuable animal ended? Up here? And more importantly, why? "You're not aggressive at all, are you?" she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the glass. "You're doing exactly what you were trained to do. Protect and defend." Y9's ears twitched in her direction, and for a moment their eyes met through the darkness. In that instant, Lynette felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This dog wasn't just a stray in need of a home. He was a trained professional who had somehow lost his way. And now she was the only one who understood what he really was. The next morning, Lynette arrived early, determined to document everything she'd observed about Y9's behavior. The way he assessed threats, his protective instincts, his silent alertness, all of it pointed to specialized training far beyond basic obedience. As she watched him methodically scanning the morning crowds, she couldn't help but wonder what circumstances had separated him from his handler and his original purpose. She noticed how he paid special attention to the security guards when they made their rounds, tracking their movements with professional interest rather than fear. When children visited the shelter, his demeanor softened slightly, though he maintained his vigilant watch. It was as if he understood the difference between potential threats and those who needed protection. Through it all, Lynette kept thinking about the previous night's break-in attempt. A normal dog would have joined in the chorus of barking, but Y9 had remained silent, assessing the situation like a trained professional. The incident had only confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. This dog was special, and his story was far from complete. The morning after the break-in attempt, Dr. Calder Boone arrived at the shelter earlier than usual, his weathered boots leaving muddy prints on the freshly mopped floor. His gray eyes were sharp with concern as Lynette briefed him about the previous night's events. "Someone tried to break in?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. "And you say Y9 acted like a trained guard dog?" "Exactly," Lynette said, leading him toward Y9's kennel. "He didn't bark or panic like the other dogs. He just watched, like he was assessing the threat." Calder nodded thoughtfully. "I've been meaning to do a full checkup on him anyway. Let's start with scanning his microchip." Y9 allowed them to approach, his amber eyes fixed particularly on Calder's scanner. The dog's behavior was markedly different from his usual defensive stance. He seemed to recognize the purpose of the medical equipment. "Well, that's interesting," Calder muttered, watching Y9's reaction. "He's familiar with vet procedures. See how he's positioning himself?" Lynette observed how Y9 had automatically shifted to make the scanning easier. He's definitely had training. The scanner beeped as it passed over Y9's shoulder blade. Calder's expression changed as he read the display. "This is unusual. The chip number is bringing up a restricted registry." He pulled out his phone and entered a series of credentials. "I still have access from my military service days. Let me see if I can—" His voice trailed off as his eyes widened. "Lynette, look at this." On the screen was a profile with a photograph of Y9 in what appeared to be tactical gear, standing beside an elegant blonde woman. The text identified her as Rhea Montfort. "Rhea Montfort," Calder read aloud, his voice low. "Wife of Silas Montfort, owner of Montfort Trucking. She's been missing for 8 months. Lynette felt her stomach tighten. Missing? There was a big investigation. She was supposed to testify in some kind of federal case against her husband's company, but she disappeared before she could appear in court. Calder scrolled through more information. Y9 was her personal protection dog, highly trained in both defensive tactics and medical alert response. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both look up. Paxton Meyer, the shelter director, was walking toward them, his cheap cologne announcing his presence before he reached them. "Dr. Boone, Miss Crow, I need to speak with you both about last night's incident." Calder quickly pocketed his phone, but Lynette noticed how Y9's posture had changed, alert and wary, tracking Paxton's every movement. "I've reviewed the security footage," Paxton said, dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief. "And given this attempted break-in, combined with Y9's history of aggressive behavior, I've made a decision. He's clearly unadoptable and a liability to this shelter." Lynette felt her heart skip a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm ordering immediate euthanasia," Paxton stated, not meeting their eyes. "For the safety of our staff and visitors." "That's not necessary," Calder interjected firmly. "This dog isn't aggressive. He's trained. His microchip proves it." "A microchip that links him to a missing person's case," Paxton said sharply. "Do you really want that kind of trouble here? The paperwork lists him as a stray, and that's what he'll remain. I want this handled today." After Paxton left, Calder pulled Lynette aside into the empty break room. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That break-in wasn't random. Someone knows Y9 is here, and they want him gone." Lynette felt cold despite the warm room. "Because he belongs to Rhea Montfort?" "Because he might be the only living witness to what happened to her." Calder ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Think about it. A trained protection dog doesn't just end up in a shelter by accident. Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide him here." "But why not just—" Lynette couldn't finish the sentence. "Kill him?" Calder finished grimly. "My guess is they tried. See that scar under his collar? But Y9's too well trained, so they did the next best thing. Dumped him in a shelter system where he'd eventually be euthanized for being unadoptable." Lynette looked through the break room window at Y9's kennel. The dog sat alert, dignified despite his circumstances, still carrying out his mission even without his handler. "We can't let them kill him," she said. "It's not that simple," Calder warned. "If we fight this, we'll draw attention. Attention from people who made a woman disappear and nearly succeeded in eliminating a highly trained military-grade protection dog. And if we don't fight it, we're helping them finish the job," Lynette countered. "We'd be helping them cover up whatever happened to Rhea Montfort." Calder studied her face for a long moment. "You barely know this dog, Lynette. Are you sure you want to take this risk?" Lynette thought about Y9's protective stance during the break-in, how he'd positioned himself between her and potential danger despite having no obligation to do so. She thought about Rhea Montfort, who had tried to testify and vanished instead. "Someone has to," she said quietly. Back at Y9's kennel, the dog watched them with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than anyone had given him credit for. Lynette felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Follow Paxton's orders and be complicit in silencing a witness, or protect Y9 and potentially put herself in the crosshairs of whatever had happened to Rhea Montfort. Calder checked his watch. "Paxton will be expecting me to prepare the euthanasia paperwork soon. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide quickly." Y9 stood at attention, his ears pricked forward, waiting, just as he had probably waited for Rhea Montfort to return. Lynette realized that this dog represented more than just an animal in need. He was a thread connecting to a larger truth, one that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. "How much time can you buy us?" she asked Calder. "I can delay the paperwork, cite the need for additional behavioral assessments. Maybe 2 days at most." He looked at her seriously. "But understand what you're getting into. This goes way beyond shelter politics." Lynette nodded, watching Y9 track the movements of a security guard passing by, alert, professional, still faithfully executing his training despite everything that had happened to him. "I understand, but I can't just stand by and let them eliminate the only witness who might know what happened to his handler." Back at her desk, Lynette's hands shook as she pulled up the shelter's adoption database. The ancient computer hummed loudly as she navigated through the clunky system, hoping no one would notice what she was about to do. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Need help with something?" Lynette jumped at Calder's voice. He stood behind her desk, coffee cup in hand, his expression carefully neutral. "I'm creating a foster record," she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else was within earshot. "For Y9. Dating it. 3 days ago, before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Calder set his coffee down and leaned closer, pretending to help with routine paperwork. "You're falsifying shelter records," he said quietly. "That's a firing offense. Better than being part of killing an innocent dog to cover up a crime." Lynette's fingers flew over the keyboard, filling in the required fields. "Besides, it's technically a foster placement, not an adoption. That gives us more time to figure things out." She could feel Calder's hesitation. Finally, he said, "Put my name as the authorizing vet. If anyone asks questions, I'll back you up." Relief flooded through her. Having an ally made her feel less alone in this dangerous game she'd stumbled into. She quickly filled out the rest of the form, listing herself as Y9's foster guardian and backdating the placement by 3 days. "There," she said, hitting save. "According to these records, Y9 was already in foster care before Paxton's euthanasia order." "Smart," Calder admitted. "But Lynette, are you sure about this? Taking him home means bringing whatever danger he's mixed up in right to your doorstep." She thought about Pearl, her sweet 10-year-old niece waiting at home. Was she putting her at risk too? But the alternative, letting them kill Y9 to silence whatever he might know about Rhea Montfort's disappearance, felt impossible now. "I have to try," she said simply. Getting Y9 into her old pickup truck proved surprisingly easy. The big shepherd followed her commands as if he'd been waiting for someone to take charge. He jumped gracefully into the back seat, settling into a watchful position where he could see both windows. The drive home to her small farmhouse took 20 minutes down winding country roads. Y9 remained alert the whole time, his ears swiveling to track every passing car. Lynette kept checking her rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following them. As they pulled up to her property, Pearl came running out to meet them, her dark curls bouncing. Lynette's heart clenched with sudden fear. "Pearl, wait! Stay back until—" But Y9's entire demeanor had already changed. His militant alertness softened as he watched the little girl approach. When Lynette opened the car door, he stepped out slowly, his tail giving a gentle wag. "Is this our new dog?" Pearl asked excitedly. "He's beautiful." "Pearl, honey, be careful. He's not used to—" Lynette's warning died in her throat as Y9 delicately approached Pearl, sniffing her hand before giving it a gentle lick. The transformation in him was remarkable. "See, he's nice," Pearl giggled, already scratching behind his ears. Y9 leaned into her touch, his previous soldierly bearing replaced by something much softer. They spent the next hour getting Y9 settled in. He explored the house methodically, checking each room as if cataloging exits and entry points. When Pearl showed him her bedroom, he immediately lay down in a position that gave him clear sight lines to both the window and door. "He's like a guard dog," Pearl observed proudly. "Something like that," Lynette murmured, watching Y9's precise movements. Everything about him spoke of extensive training. But for what exactly? She got her answer sooner than expected. They were all in the kitchen, Lynette preparing dinner while Pearl did homework at the table, when Y9 suddenly sat up straight. His attention fixed intensely on Pearl, and a low whine escaped him. "What's wrong, boy?" Lynette asked, but Y9 ignored her. He moved to Pearl's side, pressing against her leg insistently. "He's acting weird," Pearl said, looking up from her math worksheet. Then her face changed, taking on that distant look Lynette had learned to dread. "Oh, I feel funny." "Pearl?" Lynette dropped the spatula she was holding and rushed to her niece's side. But Y9 was already there, supporting Pearl as she slipped into a seizure. The dog's body provided a steady brace, preventing her from falling out of the chair. Lynette caught Pearl's other side, easing her through the familiar motions of the seizure while counting the seconds. Y9 stayed perfectly still, offering stable support until the episode passed. 3 minutes later, Pearl blinked groggily up at them. "You're okay, sweetie," Lynette soothed, stroking her niece's hair. "Y9 helped us, didn't he?" Pearl managed a weak smile, one hand reaching out to pat the shepherd's head. "Good dog," she whispered. Lynette sat back on her heels, staring at Y9 in amazement. He had known the seizure was coming before either of them saw any signs, and he had known exactly what to do to help. "You're not just a protection dog, are you?" she murmured. "You're trained for medical alert, too." Y9's intelligent eyes met hers, and she could have sworn she saw understanding there. This was no ordinary military dog. He was specifically trained for both tactical and medical support. The question was, why? What had Rhea Montfort needed with such a specially trained companion? The rest of the evening passed quietly. Pearl fell asleep early, worn out from the seizure, while Y9 took up position in the hallway where he could monitor both bedrooms. Lynette tried to focus on grading papers from her tutoring job, but her mind kept spinning with questions about the dog's mysterious past. Around 9 o'clock, movement caught her eye through the front window. A black SUV with tinted windows was idling near her gate. Even in the darkness, she could tell it wasn't a familiar vehicle from the neighborhood. Cold fear trickled down her spine. She dimmed the living room lights and reached for her phone, only to find Calder had already texted her. "Watch your back. Word's gotten out about the foster paperwork. You've stepped into something bigger than you know." Y9 appeared silently at her side, his body tense as he stared at the SUV through the window. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not the aggressive sound from the shelter, but something more controlled. A warning. Lynette's hand found his fur, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "We're in this together now, aren't we?" she whispered. The SUV's headlights finally clicked off, and the vehicle pulled away. But Lynette knew this was just the beginning. She had chosen to protect Y9, to stand against whatever forces had tried to silence him. There would be consequences for that choice. Y9 pressed closer to her side, his training evident in every alert line of his body. Whatever came next, at least they wouldn't face it alone. Deputy Bracken Lowe sat at his cluttered desk, staring at Rhea Montfort's file for the 100th time. The fluorescent lights of the North Fork Sheriff's Department buzzed overhead as he spread out surveillance photos from the night she vanished. Something wasn't adding up. "She just up and left," Silas Montfort had claimed, his polished demeanor never cracking. "My wife's always been unstable, prone to impulsive decisions." But Bracken had been a deputy long enough to know when someone was feeding him a story. He picked up a photo showing Rhea leaving a charity event 3 days before her disappearance. Her smile looked strained, her posture tense. Not the body language of someone planning to abandon her life. The desk phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. "Deputy Lowe?" "Bracken, it's Calder Boone." The veterinarian's voice was tight with urgency. "Got a minute? Something came up during Y9's checkup that you need to see." 20 minutes later, Bracken pulled into the clinic's parking lot. Calder met him at the door, leading him straight to the exam room, where Y9 lay sedated on the table. Lynette Crowe hovered nearby, concern etched on her face. "Look at this." Calder carefully parted the thick fur around Y9's neck. An old scar ran beneath his collar, precise and surgical. Someone went to a lot of trouble to remove something from under his skin. And given his training level, I'd bet it wasn't just a simple tracking chip. Bracken leaned in closer. The scar was professional work. Clean, minimal tissue damage. "Military grade?" "Could be. But why remove it? Unless—" Calder's words trailed off meaningfully. "Unless it contained data someone wanted gone," Bracken finished. He straightened up, mind racing. "When did you say this dog belonged to Rhea Montfort?" "According to the chip registry, he was with her right up until she disappeared." Lynette spoke up, absently stroking Y9's fur. "And now someone's trying awful hard to make him disappear too." Bracken nodded. "Tell me about the SUV you saw last night." "Black Suburban, tinted windows. Too clean to be local." Lynette described the vehicle's slow pass by her property. "Felt like they were casing the place." "Montfort Logistics contracts their security through Black River Solutions," Bracken said. "They're fond of black Suburbans and making problems go away." Heavy silence fell over the room. Y9 stirred slightly on the table, and Lynette's hand moved to soothe him. "So what was Rhea Montfort mixed up in?" she asked quietly. "What did she know that was worth making her vanish?" "That's the million-dollar question." Bracken pulled out his notebook. "Silas Montfort's trucking empire nearly went under during the market crash 5 years ago. Then suddenly they're not just solvent, they're thriving. New contracts, expanded routes." "Legitimate growth?" Calder asked skeptically. Bracken shook his head. "Drug enforcement's been tracking a surge in counterfeit pharmaceuticals moving through the region. Nothing ever sticks to Montfort officially, but the timing's interesting." "And if Rhea found out—" Lynette's voice trailed off. "She'd need proof to go against someone that powerful," Bracken said. "Something concrete. Something maybe stored on a device small enough to hide under a trained dog's skin." Y9's eyes opened groggily as the sedation wore off. His gaze found Lynette first, then swept the room with that unnervingly intelligent assessment. "No wonder they want him gone," Calder muttered. "He's not just a witness, he's evidence." Bracken watched the German shepherd shake off the last effects of sedation, noting how he positioned himself protectively near Lynette. "Miss Crowe, I hope you understand what you've stepped into here. These aren't people who ask nicely twice." "I understand." Lynette's voice was quiet but firm. "But I also understand that dog is the only link to a missing woman who might need help. I can't just look the other way." "No," Bracken agreed, thinking of all the times he'd been pressured to do exactly that. "I suppose you can't." He pulled out his card and wrote his personal cell number on the back. "Call me, anytime, day or night, if that SUV shows up again, or if anything feels off." "You believe us then? About Rhea Montfort?" Bracken tucked his notebook away. "Let's just say I've got questions that need answers, and right now, that dog might be the only one who knows the truth." Unine's ears pricked forward at that, as if he understood perfectly well what was being discussed. Bracken had seen a lot of trained dogs in his career, but something about this one's awareness sent a chill down his spine. "Keep him close," he advised Lynette, "and watch your back. If I'm right about what's really going on here, things are likely to get worse before they get better." As if to emphasize his point, Y9 moved to stand between Lynette and the door, his posture alert but controlled. He wasn't just a trained protection dog anymore. He was a living connection to whatever had happened to Rhea Montfort. And someone very powerful wanted that connection severed permanently. Bracken left the clinic with his mind churning. 5 years of case notes and hunches were starting to align into an ugly picture. He needed to dig deeper into Montfort Logistics shipping manifests, cross-reference them with the DEA's counterfeit drug seizures. Something had happened to spook Rhea Montfort into action, and now that same something had put Lynette Crowe in the crosshairs. He glanced in his rearview mirror as he pulled away from the clinic. A black Suburban turned onto the street 2 blocks back, moving unhurried but purposeful. Message received. The players in this game were watching every move. The question was, how many more moves did they have before someone decided to end the game permanently? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ilsa Reeves' training yard. Lynette watched the older woman study Y9 with piercing gray eyes, taking in every detail of his stance and movement. After a week of dead ends, finding someone who could help unlock Y9's training felt like stumbling onto a lifeline. "Military-grade protection work, no doubt about it," Ilsa said, her weathered face creasing in concentration. "But there's medical alert training layered in too. Expensive combination. Whoever trained this dog invested serious time and resources." Y9 sat perfectly still, his attention locked on Ilsa, with the same tactical assessment he gave everything new. His posture remained alert, but not aggressive. He seemed to recognize another professional. "Can you help us understand his commands?" Lynette asked. "We think he might be our only link to finding his previous handler." Ilsa's expression softened slightly. "The missing Montfort woman. Deputy Lowe filled me in." She pulled a worn leather training pouch from her pocket. "Let's see what your boy knows." Over the next hour, Ilsa ran through a series of hand signals and verbal commands in different languages. Y9 responded to some, ignored others, building a picture of his training protocol. "German and Czech commands for protection work," Ilsa noted. "English for medical alerts. Interesting mix." She demonstrated a series of subtle hand positions. "Watch his eyes. He's reading microsignals. That's advanced stuff." Lynette marveled at how Y9 transformed under Ilsa's expert guidance, showing capabilities they hadn't even guessed at. He could clear rooms, detect hidden threats, and signal medical emergencies with incredible precision. "Now for scent work," Ilsa said, pulling out a series of training samples. "Most protection dogs get basic tracking, but let's see how deep his training goes." They set up a simple drill first, having Y9 identify specific scents among decoys. He worked with machine-like efficiency, never hesitating or showing uncertainty. When Ilsa introduced more complex scenarios, Y9's performance remained flawless. "This is military-grade detection work," Ilsa muttered. "Your boy wasn't just trained to protect, he was taught to find things, very specific things." Calder arrived then, carrying a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a logo patch that had fallen from an old Montfort logistics crate during their earlier searching. "Let's see if this means anything to him," the vet suggested. The moment Ilsa presented the patch, Y9's entire demeanor changed. His body went rigid, nose working frantically at the fabric. A low growl built in his chest, not aggressive, but urgent. "That's a trained alert," Ilsa said sharply. "Whatever he was taught to look for, that patch is connected to it." Bracken pulled up in his patrol car just as they were processing this development. He looked tired but energized. "We might have something," he announced. "Been digging through property records. Montfort owns an old grain depot down by the river. Been shuttered for years, but satellite images show regular vehicle activity." "Perfect cover for moving things you don't want seen," Calder observed. Ilsa was watching Y9's continued fixation on the patch. "Only one way to find out if there's a connection. This boy's got the training to tell us." They drove separately to the depot, parking at a discreet distance. The facility loomed against the darkening sky, a hulking complex of concrete and corrugated metal, surrounded by chain-link fence. "Place officially closed down when river shipping dried up," Bracken explained, "but maintenance crews come through regularly, according to the logs." "Maintaining what?" Lynette wondered aloud. Y9 was already working, nose to the ground as they approached the perimeter. His training showed in every movement, systematic, thorough, professional. They followed his methodical sweep along the fence line. When they reached the loading bay area, Y9's behavior shifted dramatically. He froze, muscles trembling, giving the same urgent alert they'd seen with the patch. "What's he finding?" Lynette whispered. Ilsa studied Y9's signals intently. "Not just one thing. Multiple alerts. Whatever he's trained to detect, this place is full of it." Bracken made notes of every spot Y9 indicated, his expression growing grimmer. "These bays all connect to the old cold storage area. Perfect for things that need climate control." "Like pharmaceuticals," Calder added quietly. Y9 led them to the last loading bay and stopped dead. His alert was different this time, more intense, almost frantic. He pawed at the ground, whining softly. Lynette felt her heart skip. She'd never seen him so agitated. "This means something different, doesn't it?" Ilsa nodded slowly. "This isn't about substances anymore. This is personal. Whatever happened to his handler, this place knows." The implications hung heavy in the gathering dusk. Y9 stood rigid, still indicating the bay with desperate intensity. For the first time since this started, Lynette felt a spark of real hope. They had a solid lead. But with that hope came fear. If Y9 was right, if this place held answers about Rhea Montfort's disappearance, then they were dealing with something far darker than pharmaceutical fraud. "We need to document everything," Bracken said firmly. "Build a case proper and careful. These people have friends in high places. We only get one shot at this." Y9 maintained his alert, unwavering in his certainty. Whatever secrets this abandoned depot held, he had led them to them. Now they just had to figure out how to expose them, before someone decided to bury those secrets permanently. "Good boy," Lynette whispered, resting her hand on Y9's tense shoulder. He didn't relax, but some of the desperation left his posture. He had done his job, shown them the way. Now it was up to them to follow where it led. Lynette was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. 9 immediately positioned himself between her and the door, his posture alert but controlled. Through the window, she saw an official-looking truck with County Animal Control painted on its side. Something felt wrong. The lettering was too fresh, almost glossy in the morning sun. Y9's low growl confirmed her instincts. She called Calder first, then Bracken, keeping her voice steady as she described the situation. Both promised to come immediately. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Two men in khaki uniforms stood on her porch, clipboards in hand. Their boots were expensive leather, not the practical work shoes actual animal control officers wore. "Miss Crow," the taller one called out. "We have orders to collect the German Shepherd registered as Y9. There's been a theft report filed." Lynette's heart pounded, but she kept her voice firm. "I have legal fostering paperwork. I'll need to see your credentials and any court orders." The shorter man's friendly facade cracked slightly. "Look, lady, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Director Meyer says the dog's shelter property. Hand him over." Y9's growl deepened. He understood the threat in the man's tone. "I'll need to confirm this with the shelter directly," Lynette said, pulling out her phone. The taller man took a step forward, and Y9's hackles rose. "Bad choice," the man muttered. They left, but not before she heard the distinctive sound of metal on metal. When she finally ventured onto the porch, she found deep scratches gouged into her front door. All 4 of her truck's tires had been slashed. Her hands shook as she took photos. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was intimidation. Calder arrived first, his truck kicking up dust as he sped down her driveway. He took one look at the damage and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling in a few favors," he said grimly. "You're not staying here alone tonight." Bracken showed up minutes later, already in full deputy mode. He documented everything meticulously, his jaw tightening at each new piece of evidence. "Got the theft report here," he said, waving his tablet. "Paxton's claiming you falsified adoption records and stole shelter property. It's garbage, but it gives them cover for harassment." "They're getting desperate," Calder observed, examining the slashed tires. "These aren't random cuts. This is professional work." Y9 hadn't left Lynette's side, his body language shifting between protective alertness and increasing agitation. When they reached the back porch, he gave the same urgent signal they'd seen at the depot. Fresh paint marred the wooden boards, crude threats sprayed in red. But it was the last message that made Lynette's blood run cold. "Back off or drown with the rest." "The rest?" she whispered. The shorter thug's parting words suddenly echoed in her memory. "She'll drown like the other." Bracken was already connecting the dots. "The depot's right on the river, and there are old drainage tunnels all through that area. They're keeping her near water," Calder concluded. "Somewhere they can control access, maybe flood if needed." Lynette felt sick at the implications. But beneath the fear, something else was crystallizing. Determination. These people had counted on her being too afraid to fight back. They'd miscalculated. "I'm not backing down," she said firmly. "They wouldn't be trying so hard to scare us off if we weren't getting close." Bracken nodded approvingly. "I'll put a patrol car on rotation past your place, and I'm expediting those property warrants. They just gave us probable cause." "You're staying with me tonight," Calder insisted. "My place is more secure, and I have cameras already set up." Y9's attention hadn't wavered from the threatening graffiti. His training was telling them something vital. Rhea Montfort was alive, and they were getting closer to finding her. "We need to move fast," Lynette said. "If they're willing to do this in broad daylight, they might decide to cut their losses completely." "I'll contact some people I trust at the state level," Bracken agreed. "This is bigger than local jurisdiction now." As they worked to secure her house and salvage what they could from her vandalized truck, Lynette felt a strange calm settle over her. The fear was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, more focused. These people had thought she would break easily. Instead, they'd only made her more certain she was doing the right thing. Y9 had chosen to trust her, She wouldn't let him down now. Calder helped her pack an overnight bag, while Bracken coordinated with his deputies. Y9 remained vigilant, checking and rechecking entries and windows with military precision. "You know," Calder said quietly as they loaded her things into his truck, "most people would have given up by now, handed the dog over, walked away." Lynette thought about the desperation in Y9's alerts at the depot, the cruel implications of the threats about drowning. She thought about Rhea Montfort, somewhere in the dark, perhaps hearing water all around her. "I'm not most people," she replied simply. "And neither is he." Y9 pressed against her leg, solid and unwavering. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The people behind this had made a critical error. They'd assumed Lynette would be an easy target, a lonely woman they could frighten into silence. Instead, they'd given her something to fight for. And with every threat, every act of intimidation, they only proved how important that fight had become. As they drove away from her violated home, Lynette watched Y9 in the rearview mirror. His focus remained sharp, scanning for threats even now. He had been trained to protect, to serve, to find what others wanted hidden. And now, thanks to these attacks, they knew something vital. They were looking for someone alive, someone being held near water. It wasn't much, but it was hope. And sometimes hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. The autumn wind whipped off the river, carrying the sharp scent of decaying leaves and diesel fuel. Lynette pulled her jacket tighter as she followed Y9 along the crumbling flood wall. The massive German shepherd moved with focused intensity, his nose working the ground in precise patterns they'd practiced with Ilsa. Deputy Bracken Lowe walked slightly ahead, his flashlight beam cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Dr. Calder Boone brought up the rear, carrying a medical kit, just in case. They all tried not to think too hard about why they might need it. "The old flood control system runs all through here," Bracken explained, consulting a weathered municipal map. "Most of these access points were sealed up years ago, but..." He didn't need to finish. They all knew Silas Montfort's operation wouldn't have bothered with official permits or documentation. Y9 suddenly froze, head snapping toward a section of wall, nearly hidden by overgrown kudzu. His posture shifted into the alert stance they'd seen at the depot, but more urgent now, almost frantic. "He's got something," Lynette said, her heart beginning to race. They pushed through the thorny vines, revealing a rusted metal door set into the concrete. Y9 began digging at its base, his claws scraping against ancient padlock. "Stand back," Bracken ordered, drawing his service weapon. "Calder, get ready with that kit." The lock yielded to Bracken's bolt cutters with a sharp crack that echoed off the water. As the door groaned open, the beam of his flashlight illuminated a narrow passage stretching into darkness. Y9 darted forward before anyone could stop him, but his movement wasn't aggressive. It was purposeful, determined. They heard a soft whimper from the shadows, followed by something that might have been a sob. "Hello?" Lynette called out, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Montfort? Rhea?" "Here." The voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse. "I'm here." They found her huddled in the corner of a makeshift cell, little more than a storage alcove with a camping cot and chemical toilet. Y9 had already reached her, pressing his body against her legs as she clutched his fur with shaking hands. Rhea Montfort bore little resemblance to the polished society photos Bracken had shown them. Her blonde hair hung in matted strands, and her designer clothes had been replaced by a shabby tracksuit. But her eyes were sharp and alert as they took in her rescuers. "You found him," she breathed, looking at Y9. "You actually found him." Calder moved forward carefully, medical kit in hand. "Mrs. Montfort, I'm Dr. Boone," Are you injured? Do you need immediate medical attention? She shook her head. Just weak. They've kept me fed, given me basic medications. They needed me alive as leverage. Against who? Bracken asked, though they all suspected the answer. Against anyone who might find what Y9 was carrying. Her fingers traced the scar beneath the dog's collar. The proof of everything Silas has been doing. Everything I was going to testify about. Lynette knelt beside her, offering a bottle of water. What kind of proof? Rhea took a careful sip before answering. Shipping manifests, chemical formulas, banking records. Everything needed to prove Silas isn't just moving goods. He's manufacturing counterfeit opioids, pressing pills that look identical to prescription medications but contain God knows what. People are dying, and he's making millions. The data was in Y9's collar, Bracken pressed. A subdermal implant, military grade. When I realized what Silas was doing, I copied everything I could find. But I knew he'd search my devices, my clothes, so I had it placed in Y9. He was supposed to be my insurance policy. Her voice cracked. But they found out somehow. Took him away, extracted the implant. I thought they'd killed him. He survived, Lynette said softly. And he led us to you. But the evidence is still out there, Rhea continued urgently. Silas would have kept it, studied it to see how much I knew. He never destroys anything that might be useful, which means he still has it somewhere, Bracken finished, along with proof of who helped him set all this up. Y9 hadn't moved from Rhea's side, his body still pressed protectively against her. Looking at them together, Lynette finally understood the depth of loyalty that had driven him all this time. He hadn't just been searching for his former handler. He'd been trying to complete his mission, to protect the truth she'd entrusted him with. We need to get you both somewhere safe, Calder said, already checking Rhea's vital signs. The local hospital isn't secure enough. I have contacts at the state level, Bracken added. People I trust. We can have you in protective custody within the hour. But Rhea's eyes were fixed on Y9. He found me. After all this time, he never stopped looking. She looked up at Lynette. You saw it too, didn't you? What he really is? Lynette nodded, thinking of all the signs they'd missed at first. The tactical awareness, the medical alerting, the focused determination that everyone had mistaken for aggression. He's not just a guard dog, she said. He's a guardian. As if in response, Y9 lifted his head and gave a soft whine, the same sound he made when warning of Pearl's seizures. Immediately, Calder moved to support Rhea as she swayed. She's crashing, he announced. Blood pressure's dropping. We need to move, now. Bracken was already on his radio, calling in coordinates and backup. Lynette helped Calder gather their supplies while Y9 stood watch, his posture making it clear that no one would threaten his charge again. As they helped Rhea to her feet, she gripped Lynette's arm. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in him, for not giving up. Lynette thought of all the times she could have walked away, when Paxton threatened her job, when the thugs vandalized her home, when every sensible voice told her to let it go. But something in Y9's eyes had called to something in her soul, and she'd known she couldn't abandon him. Some things are worth fighting for, she replied simply. They emerged from the flood wall as the first rays of dawn painted the river gold. Rhea squinted at the light like it hurt her eyes, but she kept moving, supported between Calder and Bracken. Y9 paced beside them, alert for any threat. Soon they could hear sirens approaching, trusted reinforcements summoned by Bracken. But Lynette knew this wasn't over. Somewhere in Silas Montfort's empire, the evidence still waited to be found. And as long as it existed, none of them were truly safe. Looking at Y9's determined stance, at Rhea's quiet courage, at the unlikely team they'd become, Lynette felt a fierce surge of pride. They'd solved one mystery only to uncover something much bigger. But they'd face it together, guided by loyalty and truth, the very thing Silas Montfort had tried to bury in his pursuit of power. The morning light grew stronger, pushing back the shadows that had hidden so many secrets. It felt like a promise, Lynette thought. A promise that no matter how deep the darkness, there would always be those who fought to bring things into the light. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Lynette helped Rhea settle into the spare bedroom of her farmhouse. The woman's hands trembled as she sank onto the freshly made bed, her eyes darting to each window and door. "You're safe here," Lynette assured her, adjusting the curtains to block any view from outside. "Deputy Lowe has officers watching the property, and Y9 hasn't left your side." As if to confirm this, the German Shepherd pressed closer to Rhea's leg, his amber eyes scanning the room with military precision. On the bed, Rhea's fingers found his fur, gripping it like an anchor to reality. Dr. Calder-Boone moved quietly around them, setting up his medical supplies on the bedside table. "I need to document everything," he explained gently. "Every mark, every injury. It won't be comfortable, but it's necessary for the case." Rhea nodded, her face pale but determined. "I understand. I've been waiting months to tell someone the truth. I won't waste this chance." In the hallway, Pearl's voice drifted through the door as Ilsa Reeve spoke with her. "Remember, Sweet Pea, Y9 has 2 jobs now. He'll still watch over you, but he needs to protect Ms. Rhea too. Can you help him do that?" "Yes, ma'am," Pearl answered solemnly. "I can be brave like Aunt Lynette." The words squeezed Lynette's heart. She hadn't felt brave when she'd first defied orders to save Y9. She'd just known she couldn't live with herself if she'd done nothing. Deputy Bracken Lowe entered, shaking rain from his jacket. "Storm's moving in fast," he reported. "I've got the warrant processing, but this weather could complicate things. The river's already rising." "The depot," Rhea said suddenly, trying to stand. "There's more evidence there. Shipping manifests, payment records. Silas never destroys anything that might be useful for leverage. He'll have kept copies somewhere dry, somewhere above the floodline." Y9's ears pricked forward at her distress, and he gave a soft whine. Calder immediately moved to check Rhea's vital signs. "Easy now. You're still dehydrated and showing signs of prolonged malnutrition. One thing at a time." Ilsa entered with Pearl, the retired canine trainer's weathered face thoughtful. "The dog remembers his advanced training. I've been running him through scenarios. He can maintain awareness of multiple protectees while identifying threats. Pearl, show them what we practiced." Pearl walked to the far corner of the room, while Rhea remained on the bed. Y9 positioned himself at an angle that kept both in his line of sight, his body tense but controlled. "Good boy," Ilsa praised. "He'll alternate between them based on threat level, but he won't leave either unprotected. Military dogs like him are worth their weight in gold for this kind of work." Lightning flashed outside, followed by a closer rumble of thunder. Pearl flinched, and Y9 immediately shifted to check on her before returning to his guard position. "The depot won't stay dry for long," Bracken warned. "That area floods every major storm. If there's evidence there, we need to move fast." Lynette looked at the gathering in her bedroom, the traumatized witness, the loyal dog, her vulnerable niece, and the unlikely allies who'd helped her get this far. The weight of what they'd uncovered pressed down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about one missing woman anymore. This was about a criminal empire built on corruption and human suffering. "How many people have died?" she asked Rhea softly. "Too many." Rhea's voice shook. "The counterfeit opioids. They look exactly like prescription pills, but the dosages are all wrong. People overdose without ever knowing they've taken something dangerous. And anyone who gets too close to the truth..." She trailed off, her meaning clear. Calder finished noting down Ria's injuries in his medical log. Multiple contusions, evidence of restraints, severe malnutrition. This is enough for criminal charges, but the drug operation is the bigger threat. Which is why we need what's in that depot, Bracken insisted. Ria's testimony is powerful, but physical evidence will make the case bulletproof. We need those records. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof. Pearl moved to sit beside Ria, and Y9 adjusted his position again, never losing his vigilant posture. "I'll show you," Ilsa said to Pearl. "Watch his signals." She made a sudden movement toward Ria, and Y9 immediately placed himself between them, even as he kept Pearl in his peripheral vision. "See? He's reading the whole room, anticipating threats. Now we're going to practice response scenarios." For the next hour, as the storm grew stronger, Ilsa worked with Y9 and Pearl, teaching them both the commands and signals they'd need. The dog moved with fluid grace between his charges, while Pearl absorbed the instructions with surprising maturity. Lynette used the time to secure the house, checking locks and drawing curtains. Calder organized his medical supplies and evidence documentation, while Bracken coordinated with his trusted officers by phone. "The warrant's through," he announced finally. "As soon as this weather breaks, we can move on the depot. But we'll need to leave people here to protect Ria and Pearl." "I'll stay," Ilsa offered. "Y9 knows me now, and between us, we can keep them safe." Another thunderclap shook the windows, and they could hear the wind rising to a howl. Lynette thought of the depot by the river, imagining years of criminal evidence being threatened by the rising water. Everything they needed to bring down Silas Montfort's empire could be washing away, even as they spoke. "How much time do we have?" she asked Bracken. He checked his phone. "The river's rising fast. Maybe 3 hours before that area starts to flood. We need to move soon, storm or no storm." Calder finished packing his medical kit. "I'm coming with you. If anyone's hurt, you'll need me." "Be careful," Ria said suddenly. "Silas doesn't just have hired thugs. He has people in law enforcement and government. You don't know who to trust." "We trust each other," Lynette said firmly. "That's gotten us this far." Pearl hugged her aunt's waist. "Like Y9 trusts you?" Lynette smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those first days at the shelter. Exactly like that. The storm raged outside, but inside the farmhouse, their unlikely family stood united. They had 3 hours to gather the evidence they needed. 3 hours to prove what Ria had risked everything to expose. 3 hours before the rising waters might wash away their chances of justice. Y9 stood alert between his charges, the perfect symbol of their mission, protecting the vulnerable while pursuing the truth. As lightning illuminated the room, Lynette saw determination reflected in every face. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The rain beat against the windows like a warning, but they had work to do. Lives to save, justice to serve. And not even the storm could stop them now. Through sheets of rain, Lynette peered at the shadowy bulk of the Montfort depot. Lightning flashed, illuminating the rusted loading bays where they'd first found Ria. The river churned behind the building, its waters rising steadily with each passing minute. "Security cameras are down," Bracken reported, lowering his binoculars. "Storm took out the power grid 10 minutes ago." Calder adjusted his raincoat. "That's our window then, before their backup generators kick in." They moved quickly through the downpour, Y9 leading the way. The German Shepherd's training showed in every silent step, his body language alerting them to potential threats. At the side entrance, Bracken made quick work of the lock while Lynette kept watch. Inside, emergency lights cast an eerie red glow through the cavernous space. Stacks of shipping crates loomed like canyon walls, creating a maze of shadows. The air smelled of damp concrete and engine oil. "Rhea said the toolbox would be under the main loading platform," Lynette whispered, "hidden behind a false panel." Wayne moved ahead, his nose working. The dog had memorized Rhea's scent from items at the farmhouse, and now he tracked her old path through the depot. They followed him past empty offices and abandoned equipment until they reached the central loading area. Thunder boomed overhead as they searched the platform's underside. Calder's flashlight beam caught something, scratch marks on a section of metal plating. "Here," he said, "help me with this." Together they pried loose the panel. Behind it, wedged into a narrow space, sat a battered red toolbox. Lynette's hands shook as she pulled it free. "This is it," she breathed. "All the original shipping manifests, proving which routes carried the counterfeits." Before they could open it, Y9's head snapped up, his muscles tensed, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "Company," Bracken hissed, drawing his weapon. Headlights swept across the loading bay windows. Car doors slammed outside. "Move!" Lynette grabbed the toolbox as they rushed for cover behind a stack of crates. They weren't fast enough. The side door burst open, and men in dark clothing poured in. Leading them was a familiar face, Paxton Meyer, the shelter director who'd tried to have Y9 euthanized. "Find them!" he barked. "And burn it all! Montfort wants no traces left." The crack of gunfire sent them scrambling deeper into the warehouse. Y9 stayed close to Lynette, his body vibrating with controlled energy. As they rounded a corner, she stumbled, and her phone clattered across the concrete floor. The screen lit up, revealing the GPS tracking app they'd used to document the depot's location. Before she could retrieve it, the first traces of smoke began curling through the air. Orange light flickered against the walls as Montfort's men set fires at strategic points throughout the building. "They're cutting off our escape routes," Bracken said grimly. "We need to move now." The smoke thickened rapidly. Lynette could hear the hungry roar of flames spreading through the dry wooden crates. The heat was already becoming intense. "The evidence," she gasped. "We can't let them destroy it all." She clutched the toolbox tighter, but her eyes kept returning to the fallen phone. That GPS data could prove they'd found Rhea here, corroborating her story about being held prisoner. "Lynette, don't!" Calder called, but she was already moving. She sprinted back toward the phone, Y9 right beside her. The smoke burned her eyes and throat. Just a few more steps. The sound came first, a deep, splintering crack from overhead. Lynette looked up to see a massive support beam, weakened by the flames, breaking free from the ceiling. She tried to dive clear, but wasn't fast enough. The beam crashed down, pinning her left leg to the floor. White-hot pain shot through her body as she screamed. "Help!" she cried out, but the roar of the fire swallowed her voice. 9 barked sharply, the first time she'd ever heard him make the sound. The dog disappeared into the smoke, and for a moment, Lynette felt utterly alone. The flames were closer now. She could feel their heat on her face, see their dance reflected in the growing pools of water from the sprinkler system. The smoke was so thick she could barely breathe. Then Y9 was back, and he wasn't alone. He had the end of a fire hose clamped in his powerful jaws, dragging it toward her. Behind him, she could make out Bracken and Calder following the hose's path through the smoke. "Hold on!" Bracken shouted. Together, he and Calder heaved at the beam while Y9 stood guard, his body alert for threats even amid the chaos. With a grinding sound, the beam shifted. Lynette pulled her leg free, gasping at the pain. Calder immediately checked for brakes while Bracken aimed the hose at the nearest flames. "Can you walk?" Calder had to shout over the fire's roar. Lynette tested her weight. "I think so. The toolbox. Right here." Bracken held up their prize. "And your phone too. Now move." I-9 led the way, choosing the clearest path through the smoke and flames. His training was evident in every decision, picking routes that avoided structural weaknesses, staying low where the air was clearest, constantly checking back to ensure they were following. They burst out of the depot into the rain, gasping for clean air. Behind them, the warehouse was fully engulfed, orange flames reaching into the storm-dark sky. In the distance, sirens wailed. Lynette sank to her knees in the mud, trembling with pain and adrenaline. I-9 pressed against her side, his fur wet with rain and smoke, but his eyes still scanning for dangers. "You saved my life," she told him softly, burying her face in his neck. "You wouldn't leave me." "That's one remarkable dog," Bracken said, still gripping the toolbox. "And we got what we came for." This evidence, combined with Ria's testimony. "Montfort's finished," Calder finished. He was examining Lynette's leg, which was already showing impressive bruising. "You'll need x-rays, but I don't think anything's broken. Just badly bruised." Lynette barely heard them. She was focused on Y-9, remembering that first day at the shelter when everyone thought he was too dangerous to approach. Now she understood. He hadn't been dangerous. He'd been waiting. Waiting for someone who needed his protection, his loyalty, his unwavering courage. "Good boy," she whispered, and his tail wagged once, a soldier acknowledging praise for a mission accomplished. The steady beep of hospital monitors pulled Lynette from a hazy sleep. Her leg throbbed beneath crisp white sheets, and the antiseptic smell made her nose wrinkle. Afternoon sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the institutional green walls. "Welcome back," Calder Boone said softly from his chair beside her bed. "How's the pain?" Lynette shifted, wincing. "Like I got hit by a truck, or maybe a burning building." Her attempt at humor fell flat as memories of the warehouse fire flooded back. "Where's Y-9? "With Ilsa. She's keeping him at her training facility. Safest place for him right now." Calder leaned forward, his normally cheerful face serious. "You've got a grade 2 sprain and some nasty bruising, but nothing broken. You were lucky." "Lucky to have Y-9, Lynette corrected. She could still see him emerging from the smoke with that fire hose, refusing to abandon her even as the flames closed in. "Has there been any word about—" The door opened, cutting off her question. Deputy Bracken Lowe entered, followed by Ria Montfort. The older woman looked better than when they'd first found her in that hidden cell. Some color had returned to her face, and her blonde hair was neatly styled. But fear still haunted her eyes. "We need to leave," Ria said without preamble. "All of us. You don't know Silas like I do. He'll never stop coming after us now that we have proof of his operation." Bracken crossed his arms. "Running won't solve anything. He'll just find new victims, start the operation somewhere else." "You don't understand," Ria's composure cracked. "He has people everywhere. Judges, politicians, police. Why do you think no one found me all those months? He'll bury the evidence and make us disappear, just like he did to others who tried to expose him." Lynette pushed herself up straighter, ignoring the protest from her injured leg. "No," she said firmly. "I won't run. I won't let him win." "Lynette," Calder started, but she cut him off. "I have a niece to protect, a home. I won't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when he'll find us." She met Ria's frightened gaze. "And you deserve justice. Real justice, not just escape." The door opened again, admitting Ilsa Reeve. The retired K-9 trainer's weathered face was thoughtful as she caught the end of Lynette's declaration. "The girl's right," Ilsa said. "Sometimes you have to turn and face the wolf at your door." She paused, then added, "And I might know how." Everyone turned to her. Ilsa pulled up a chair, her movements deliberate as she gathered her thoughts. Silas wants Y9 because he thinks the dog might still have evidence somehow, yes? Even after removing whatever was originally implanted? At their nods, she continued. Then let's use that. Make him think he's right. What do you mean? Bracken asked. Y9 is trained in tactical operations. With the right equipment, we could use him as bait, but bait with teeth. Ilsa's eyes gleamed. We rig him with a hidden camera and microphone, live streaming everything. Get Silas to incriminate himself while thinking he's retrieving evidence. It's too dangerous, Calder protested, for Y9 and whoever's with him. Not if we control the location, Bracken said slowly, warming to the idea. Choose somewhere we can monitor, somewhere with significance. The levee, Rhea whispered. Where he kept me. He's arrogant enough to appreciate the symmetry of ending things there. Lynette felt a chill despite the warm hospital room. How would we get him there? Anonymous tip, Bracken suggested. Let him think someone spotted Y9 there, maybe acting strange like he's trying to dig something up. His paranoia about hidden evidence would do the rest. I have tactical gear that could work, Ilsa added. Camera and mic small enough to hide in a modified collar. We'd need a secure channel for the live stream, though. I know someone, Bracken said. Works in cybersecurity, owes me a favor. We could broadcast to multiple secure locations simultaneously. Police stations in different jurisdictions, news outlets, federal offices. Too many points of reception for Silas to block or corrupt them all. Lynette listened as they refined the plan, her determination growing. This was how they'd end it. Not by running, but by using Silas's own paranoia and arrogance against him. Y9 had protected her. Now she would protect him, turning his role from evidence carrier to evidence gatherer. I want to be there, she said during a lull in the planning. Absolutely not, Calder responded immediately. You can barely walk. I need to be there, Lynette insisted. Y9 trusts me. He'll perform better with me present, and you know it, she added, looking at Ilsa. The trainer nodded reluctantly. She's not wrong. These dogs bond deeply with their handlers. Having her there would help sell the scenario too. Make it look more like an amateur operation instead of a sting. We could put her in one of the observer positions, Bracken mused. Up on the levee wall, with a clear view but good cover. I'll have backup units hidden in the drainage tunnels below. Rhea, who had been quiet during the planning, suddenly spoke up. I'll be there too. When everyone started to object, she held up her hand. Not visible, not in danger. But I need to see him face justice. I need to see it end. Lynette reached out and squeezed the older woman's hand, understanding completely. This wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore. It was about standing up, about refusing to be victims, about turning fear into strength. 2 days, Bracken said finally. Give that leg time to heal a bit more, and let me get everything in place. Ilsa, you'll work with Y9 on the gear? Already have some ideas, the trainer confirmed. We'll practice with dummy equipment first, make sure he's comfortable. As they continued discussing logistics, Lynette sank back against her pillows. Her leg ached, and fear still flickered at the edges of her mind. But her resolve was solid. She thought of Pearl, safe at her sister's house. Of Y9, who had refused to leave her in that burning warehouse. Of Rhea, who had survived months of captivity without breaking. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to face the wolf at their door and make sure he never threatened anyone again. The afternoon sun slanted lower through the hospital window, casting long shadows that reminded her of prison bars. Soon those shadows would fade, just like Silas Montfort's power over them all. They had truth on their side now, and loyalty, and courage. Most importantly, They had each other. Looking around at her unlikely team, the principled deputy, the compassionate vet, the tough trainer, the resilient survivor, Lynette knew they would succeed. Not because they were stronger or smarter than Silas, but because they stood together, bound by something he could never understand. The simple, unshakable determination to do what was right. Dawn crept across the levee in whispers of pink and gold, painting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Lynette stood at the rusty gate, her injured leg aching beneath her jeans. The morning air held an autumn chill that made her grateful for her thick sweater. Beside her, Y9 sat perfectly still, his new collar nestled invisibly among his fur. Through her earpiece, she heard Calder's steady voice. "Video feed is crystal clear, audio coming through perfectly." She could picture him in his truck half a mile away, monitoring multiple screens. "Bracken's teams are in position." Lynette's hand found Y9's head, drawing comfort from his solid presence. They had practiced this dozens of times with Ilsa. Y9 knew exactly how to position himself to capture everything on the hidden camera. Still, her heart thundered against her ribs. The crunch of tires on gravel made her stiffen. A black SUV appeared around the bend, moving unhurriedly. Silas Montfort clearly wasn't concerned about being seen. Why would he be? As far as he knew, this was just a simple transaction. The troublesome shelter worker finally giving up the dog in exchange for being left alone. The vehicle stopped 30 feet away. Silas emerged alone, exactly as Bracken had predicted. He wore an expensive wool coat against the morning chill, his silver hair perfectly styled. His smile looked almost genuine as he approached. "Miss Crow," he called out pleasantly, "I'm glad you finally came to your senses. This has all been quite unnecessary." Lynette forced herself to breathe steadily. "I just want this to be over." "Of course you do." He stopped a few yards away, studying Y9 with obvious satisfaction. "You've taken good care of him, I'll give you that. Now, why don't you hand over his leash, and we can all get back to our lives?" The practiced calm Lynette had maintained began to crack. Seeing him there, so confident, so certain of his power, it made her think of Rhea, trapped in that dark cell for months, of all the others who might have disappeared the same way. "Like you let Rhea get back to her life?" The words burst out before she could stop them. Silas's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean. My wife chose to leave." "We found her." Lynette's voice grew stronger. "We found where you kept her prisoner." "Careful, Miss Crow." His tone remained pleasant, but warning edged each word. "Wild accusations can be dangerous. She was your wife, she trusted you, and you locked her away like she was nothing." Something shifted in Silas's expression, pride overtaking caution. "Rhea was weak," he sneered. "She thought she could threaten everything I built because of her soft heart. I couldn't let that happen. Making one inconvenient witness disappear was simple enough." Y9 growled softly, positioning himself between Lynette and Silas. The hidden camera captured every micro-expression as Silas continued, his mask falling away completely. "Do you know how many people disappear every year, Miss Crow? How easy it is to make someone simply cease to exist? Rhea thought she could expose my supply chain, ruin everything. She never understood that power means making hard choices." "About your counterfeit drug operation?" Lynette pressed, heart pounding as he incriminated himself further. Silas laughed coldly. "Among other things, the pharmaceutical market is just the beginning, but you'll never prove any—" "Police, don't move!" Bracken's voice boomed across the levee as officers emerged from multiple hiding spots. Silas's face transformed from smug superiority to shock as he realized what had happened. He lunged toward Lynette, but Y9 was faster. The dog's training kicked in instantly. He knocked Silas off balance without actually biting, keeping him down until officers reached them. As Bracken cuffed him, Silas finally noticed the collar, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You little—" "Silas Montfort," Bracken cut him off. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy, drug trafficking, and attempted murder. Everything you just said has been broadcast live to multiple law enforcement agencies and news outlets." He tightened the cuffs with satisfaction. "You have the right to remain silent, though that might have been more useful about 5 minutes ago." The next 48 hours unfolded like a thunderstorm breaking. News helicopters circled Montfort's downtown headquarters as federal agents carried out box after box of evidence. His empire, built on counterfeit medications and buried secrets, crumbled in real time on national television. Lynette watched the coverage from her farmhouse kitchen, Y9's head resting on her lap. The morning shows played Silas's recorded confession on repeat. His sneer, his casual admission of kidnapping his own wife. It was all there in high definition. Phone lines at the FBI's tip hotline lit up as others came forward with stories of vanished whistleblowers and suspicious accidents. At the county jail, Paxton Meyer broke down during questioning. He confessed to destroying shelter records and accepting bribes to help cover up Y9's presence. His perfectly pressed shirts couldn't hide his trembling hands as officers led him to booking. The preliminary hearing came 3 days later. Lynette's hands shook as she approached the witness stand, but steadied when she saw Calder Boone in the gallery. He gave her a subtle nod, pride clear in his gray eyes. Y9 sat perfectly still beside her chair as she testified, his presence lending her strength. "I knew something was wrong the moment I saw him," she told the packed courtroom, describing Y9's protective instincts and tactical training. He wasn't just a stray. He was trying to complete his mission, protecting people from harm. When she finished, Judge Marshall stared hard at Silas. "Based on the overwhelming evidence, including Mr. Montfort's recorded confession, this case will proceed to trial. Bail is denied." Calder met her outside the courthouse, his hand finding hers. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood up when everyone else looked away." Rhea hugged Y9 one last time, her thin fingers buried in his thick fur. The safe house behind her looked nothing like her former mansion, but her smile was genuine for the first time in years. "He was meant to find you," she told Lynette, pressing Y9's official papers into her hands. "You gave him a purpose beyond just being a guard dog. You showed him love." Y9's tail wagged gently as he looked between the two women. His mission to protect Rhea was complete, but his bond with Lynette and Pearl had grown into something deeper. Back at the farmhouse, Pearl sat cross-legged on the living room floor, practicing hand signals with Y9. Her seizures were better managed now that they had warning. "Good boy," she exclaimed, as Y9 gave the gentle nose bump that meant danger coming. The sound of hammering drifted through the open windows. Outside, Calder Boone worked steadily, replacing the broken porch railings. The vandal's damage was nearly erased, though sometimes Lynette still checked the locks twice at night. "Almost done," Calder called out, wiping sweat from his own forehead. "This porch will be stronger than before." Lynette joined him, handing him a glass of lemonade. The late afternoon sun caught the silver in his hair, and her heart warmed at his patient dedication. "Everything's stronger now," she said quietly. "Including me." She thought about those first days at the shelter, when backing down would have been so easy. One scared dog had led her to uncover so much wrong, and find the courage to make it right. Y9 padded out to join them, settling at their feet like he'd always belonged there. In many ways, he had. The autumn breeze carried the scent of popcorn and excitement across the middle school track field. Lynette leaned against the metal bleachers, watching Pearl take her place at the starting line. Her niece's running shoes were new, a small celebration of how far they'd come. Y9 paced steadily alongside the track, his attention fixed on Pearl. He no longer wore the tactical vest of his military days, just a simple blue collar that matched Pearl's team colors. "She's got this," Calder said, his shoulder brushing Lynette's as he joined her. His gray eyes held a warmth that made her pulse quicken. "Both of you do." A car backfired in the parking lot, making several parents jump. Y9's head snapped up, but his eyes went straight to Lynette. She gave him a gentle hand signal, all clear. He relaxed, returning to his watch over Pearl. The sight brought tears to Lynette's eyes. Gone was the frightened shelter dog, the evidence carrier, the soldier waiting for commands from a missing handler. In his place stood her partner, choosing to guard her family because he wanted to, not because he had to. Pearl crossed the finish line with a beaming smile, and Y9 trotted to meet her, tail wagging. Calder's hand found Lynette's, and she squeezed it tight. She was no longer the invisible clerk, afraid to make waves. She had become someone who fought for what was right, and won. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.